Hi everyone, this is another episode of the streaming Caffeine as a host Jove, and today I'm inviting Mastafa from Resmo to join the talk. And by the way, I'm so lazy today, so I didn't bring any fancy coffee, so I just used this instant coffee. I guess I got from Europe, and this is really good enough. And feel free to introduce yourself and what kind of coffee you're drinking today, by the way.
Yeah. Hi, I'm Mastafa. I am the co-founder of Resmo, and today I'm drinking just regular coffee from the machine. Uh,
I think I tried the Resmo, I guess almost half years ago. I was very impressed for you guys can reach out to so many different sources. Or maybe I'm not really the best person. You will be much better to describe what kind of service or kind of value you guys provide in Resmo. And is the Resmo more like resource monitoring?
mhm.
Okay, cool. Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, I mean, that's the initial point we started. I mean, we were collecting resources and monitoring them, and we just looked up the domain resource monitoring Resmo, and the IO was free, and some guy from France reached out to us. Do you want to get the .com as well? So we decided that's the domain name for us. So in short, I mean, we collect resources data from multiple providers in the context of security, because the configuration errors are very common in cloud and SaaS tools, and they can lead to severe security problems, because as much as the cloud is easy to use, it's also easy to misconfigure it, and with one mistake you can open your data to public or break some checks or disable your features. Anything can happen, and that's why we built Resmo, because we have seen this problem. We use lots of tools, lots of cloud tools and SaaS tools, and within those we do many things that we are not even aware of. We use one service that creates another thing, and the cascading effect, we end up with lots of resources. That's why we focused on resource part. For example, in the cloud context, we get the configuration of an S3 bucket, but not its data in it. So we do a read-only check on those tools. We do the collection via either polling, because not every API can push data to us through webhooks. But if we have the ability to use webhooks, we certainly use them. For example, in SaaS space, Google Workspace is our most used integration. And if someone has become an admin or added to a group, removed from a group, or changed the critical settings in the Google Workspace, we can get this information immediately and save this in our database. And we let this data to be explorable using SQL. I mean, my father has been writing SQL since I was a little child, so I was always fascinated by how good SQL is expressing this data fetching. You just write some words and the data comes in a nice tabular format, and this it fits right in our usage. And with those SQL capability, that's the core piece. We try to build use cases on top of it. For instance, we check for basic security checks or the advanced things we can do with SQL, because we have the ability to join this data among multiple resources or multiple providers. For example, we can check if someone is in Google Workspace, is not in, but there is also someone in your AWS account that shouldn't be there. They are not in your directory. They're a shadow user, or even worse, a hacker. And we can do this with SQL, the power of SQL. That's why we have chosen SQL.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think the very reason I start trying Resmo because it's more from kind of like user or customer perspective. That is, as a startup company, in tech, we don't want to maintain so many steps ourselves, right? That's the reason why we use many SaaS solutions, right? So we use Auth0, we have using Slack, AWS, Kubernetes, HubSpot. The list is on and on. And on one end, we already passed our SOC to Tab 1, working on Tab 2, but we do need to monitoring all the resources to figure out whether anything we can improve to make the things more secure. And also, we also want to making sure there's no like resource is isolated, is upscaled, or it's wasted, right? So when I check Resmo and try the product, I really get impressed regarding you have so many integration, maybe, I don't know, maybe even like 100 to popular sources, and almost every week, every 2 weeks, you guys have new newsletter announcing new integration. That's awesome. And the other thing that is, I guess it's not really something must have, but at least for me, I'm really a SQL person, right? So I'm okay to write like Python script or Java or whatsoever, but I really think using SQL to describe this condition in the where clause, no matter it's like exact match or like or equals or any kind of combination, or even with certain kind of join and the JSON parsing, this is I'm really big fan of using a big UI form to describe the logic. So I know in some other systems they might providing either a UI form or some special language, but I think if Resmo already provide a SQL-based resource management and even with some dashboard, notebook, and alert, yeah, I guess it will be even no learning curve for me. So I'm very impressed by that. So can you tell me more about or share with this audience for this podcast, that is how you guys achieve such a low latency, right? I mean, the context of that is, this podcast is called Streaming Caffeine, right? So mainly about the data streaming. But streaming can mean a lot, but one of the immediate value is real time. It is very obvious Resmo already achieved the real time part. Maybe you can share a little about one is, do you planning to add more streaming semantics, something similar, watermark or time window in Flink or in other systems like Timeplus? But the other question I do want to add that is, how you guys achieve such a low latency? So I'm really curious about how this balance is made in the context of Resmo. Yeah.
Thank you for kind words. We are collecting lots of data, even though it doesn't mostly change. We have to ask the API provider what's the latest version right now. And when we are doing this, not every resource can be fetched from single API call. We need to list the resources, maybe describe detailed API endpoint one more time for each resource, and it can be time consuming if we do it very sequentially. We rely on asynchronous events a lot. We try to split the processing of the data and fetching of this data independent from each other, so that we can scale this collection and saving and alerting separate. Right now we have built this as a monolith, but it's a modular monolith that talks with queues. We are using AWS, by the way. We are using SQS a lot. When we fetch a resource, it's pushed to every data collection is triggered by queues. We don't block on when we receive a webhook or when we are doing a HTTP call to another service. We try to parallelize them a lot because we are doing lots of network I/O. We have to. They are not CPU bound, but they are I/O bound. They are also not I/O intensive in terms of bandwidth, but we are doing lots of operations, opening sockets each other, to opening new threads to fetch this data. Our backend is in Kotlin, and we achieve this. How should I say? By separating the consors, we fetch this data, then kick another process to save this data so that it can be retried idempotently. That's one of the things that helps us to scale fast. And we are, being close to the providers also helps. We don't host in Europe because every major provider is in US, either West or East. We chose West because it's more a stable region. We have backup in East, but we mostly use US West. And yeah, basically we try to be efficient in our code. It can matter because, as I said, we are describing those resources. Sometimes it can be a lot. They have to be persistent in memory. We try to save them in batches, not keep them all is in memory. That's not exactly like streaming, but it looks like streaming, but it is like a micro batches. And right now, as we collect two types of data. One is configuration of these resources. They tend to be small in the volume compared to the other type of data, which is audit logs or security logs we collect from providers. That data is immutable and streaming to us. We just started doing that a few months ago because even though we collect this data, configuration data, there is another huge information resides in audit logs that details this person signed into this tool using this IP, or they are using this one password item, or they changed something in Cloudflare that is unusual. We are working on building the unusual activity based on the changes that we detect and the changes we detect from audit logs. That's where we plan to use a streaming technology like Flink. I have used Flink early in my career in 2015 or 16, I guess, where we had a similar log system. I was first introduced to streaming concepts there. We were collecting logs and building a security product again. It was an internal thing, but it looks easy to just say, I will save this to the data to my database and query it periodically, but it doesn't scale. It won't scale in that volume of data. You need to do something different because when you do lots of queries, you will be reading all the data from the system all the time, and it will mess with the caches, mess with your contention from disk, and it won't be as efficient as streaming. That's why we built a simple streaming detection with Flink back then. It was just counting events based on time windows, and if it detected anomaly compared to the previous time window, it was just firing alerts. And even that was very helpful to utilize the system resources better. That's our plan. We will introduce something similar in Resmo. We are working on it, but yeah, it's still in the works.
Yeah, that's awesome. Yeah. Again, for example, Timeplus is somehow in this stream database category right now, and but in general, this streaming processing, there's a common concept is called materialized view, right? So you try to get data from different sources. Even some data can be append only or can have certain primary key, so you can do some kind of version tracking or changelog tracking. But again, one of the common use that is no matter how data is changed, but we somehow create either a materialized view or kind of like a versioned object with primary key, then people just query on that materialized view anytime as if it is a static table, right? So I guess I didn't know more about all those details about Resmo, but from end user perspective, I can just set up all those data collection. For example, all those new users or any change on the auth 0, then anytime I just using SQL to query that table, it feel like a materialized view in the context of streaming processing. That is, it's always the latest result. There's no duplicated event. I don't care too much about the history. I just want to know what's exactly right now. I think that Resmo already handled this very well without introducing too many concepts or building blocks. This different tables is already kind of like a materialized view in the context of streaming. Do you agree that?
Yeah, yeah. It's similar to materialized views in concept, very much similar.
Okay, cool. And I think if I get the impression right, that is, you guys also leveraging one of the either query engine or SQL parser open sourced by AWS, right?
Yeah, we are using Particle. It was open sourced, like 3 years ago, I guess. I'm not sure what AWS is using it for. They have it embedded in few services, which is hard to write queries like DynamoDB. They want to make SQL look like they use that language to convert your SQL query to the DynamoDB expressions. They use it in other systems like QLDB. But our use cases, we use that they have a simple implementation. We make use of it, we extend it, and we store this data independent of the storage. That particle allows us to query that data. Another reason is that particle also supports nested data, and that is very common in the cloud configurations. They are never simple tables, and we are using it to simplify some of the queries. We can write custom functions. For example, a security group rules are very complex. If you want to say, does this security group allow these certain ports from these certain IPs, writing it in pure SQL would be, even though SQL is great, it would be a nightmare. So we do have some utilities like that we can embed. We can also do some live queries to live systems. We fetch the API result from somewhere. Like we get the IP ranges of AWS for each service. That is live data. We don't store it, and you can use it in particular by this abstraction. It is similar to what Snowflake or others doing. They want to abstract the compute from the storage. It's not that in that scale, but I see that as a trend for all the databases that claim to be scaled, because traditional databases are just believed to be not scaling very well because of the limited resources, need for global locks, and yeah, we are using Particle for that reason.
Cool. Yeah. I forgot what kind of language it is based in. It's Rust, C++, or Java.
Yeah, they have both Rust and Kotlin implementation. Rust is fairly new. It doesn't support all the language features, but we are looking forward to migrate to Rust at some point.
Okay, cool. Yeah, awesome. Yeah, thank you for sharing all the high-level design and some of the reason why you choose that. Maybe we can also talk a little bit about your journey as a co-founder. I think you spent some time in, is that in one of the product team in Atlasia, or can you share more about that? And what kind of problem you see, and all from the customer side, so that you and your co-founders decided to start the company Resmo?
Yeah, I was an early engineer at Opsgenie, which was an alerting platform for on-call engineers. We had that latency sensitivity there. If we receive an alert, we had to route it to the customer, ring their phone in a few milliseconds. I worked in the SRE team there, and we built internal tools, worked on the system reliability, and being a small startup, I also did IT related things sometimes. That's how we get the idea for Resmo, because once Opsgenie was acquired by Atlassian, we had to migrate all the things we had to Atlassian network, infrastructure, platforms that they have equivalence in. And that process yielded that, yeah, we have lots of things that we don't even know them. There were lots of developer AWS accounts, there were tools they are using. The tool owner has left the company and we don't even have the credentials anymore. These things happen when you grow fast, and if you cannot keep track of everything as a small IT team. Even if you have a huge IT team, people just go and use because signing up to services are just logging with Google button and you have an account there. And we wanted to fix this problem. I mean, we had all these things scattered around multiple tools. We wanted to build a source of truth for your company. And there are, of course, there are security tools and asset directories out there already existing, but our focus was making this very easy. Not everyone has the time or effort to learn details. We wanted to give them out of the box integrations and rule sets, insights, even for small companies, so they have a good starting point, because how late you do it, you will be in more mess. That's why we wanted to build a tool like Resmo. We visioned it.
Yeah, cool. And I'm not sure how long your company is. Is like more like 2-3 years?
Yeah, it's almost 2 years.
Yeah, cool. And I'm again very impressed for those linking updates, those in product updates. What's new? You guys are really moving very fast, and also start touch more domains, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome. Is there any kind of like lesson learned as a co-founder of a startup company you can share with us?
Yeah, one of the things we believe we are doing good is iterating fast. We try to test ideas as soon as possible. We have it. We evaluate after we evaluate it in our minds, and we need to test it. We try to test it in a few months, not a year, because what you believe the customer has the problem is usually very different in reality. And we want something to show to customers as soon as possible. Even as a draft, some of the functionalities are working. We try to show our customers that's the direction we are going. What do you think about this? That's the conversation we are trying to make. And we get their ideas very quickly, and it helps our direction to be more clear.
Yeah, that's cool. And which country, city you are based in, and you mentioned maybe many of your data center or customer is in US, and do you have a lot of meeting in the early morning or late nights?
Yeah, our company is based on US, but right now we are in Turkey as engineering team and product team. We have late night meetings, but we are used to that because of Atlassian. We had 3 time zones: San Francisco, Turkey, India, and Sydney, all different parts of the world. It can be hard. It's not that easy. But talking with real customers on their real problems, we try to make that time as much as we can. Yeah.
Yes, yeah, likewise. I really echo that is as an engineer or kind of a former engineer, I'm no longer writing production code anymore, but we have a lot of ideas, and there's many different ways to doing the same thing. We can keep refining it, right? No matter code style, those new libraries, even new programming language, different architectural design, but knowing what exactly you want from the customer is so kind of encouraging, right? You have a good way to say this is not really running fast, but it solves the real problem.
Yeah.
This is really give us a lot of idea regarding which one should be built which one should be built first, and how good it should be. Do I need to be that perfect, or did I miss anything? Yes, having this feedback loop is really important.
Yeah, exactly.
That's awesome. Yeah, I really appreciate you take the time to talk with us. Do you have any question to myself, or do you want to share anything else?
I mean, not. I'm thinking of something related to Timeplus. So, why did you decide to build Timeplus?
Okay, yeah, sure. So it's even someone told me that is, hey, Jove, I checked your profile and the profiles for rest of the founding team. Many of you coming from Splunk. Assume you guys are very familiar with log analysis or observability in general. Why you guys don't just create the other subcommunity for observability, right? So the short answer that is we in Splunk, it is really a very nice data platform, starting from the log or security. Even some people using Splunk as a database, right? But again, it's not really a database. And when we facing some huge volume with high expectation on the low latency stuff or complex kind of like joining, it is doable, but it's not really in a traditional database-based fashion, right? So basically, when I was in Splunk and many other co-founders, we get this we get this idea that this customer really wants something faster at a massive scale, and also do flexible analysis, right? So we'd like to see whether there's a new way to build it without using too much revert index or log-based store, or send everything to the database, then do the query over again. As you mentioned, it can be a waste of the system resource. So in the last few years, in the last 1 or 2 years, my time in Splunk, we are building something with Flink, with Kafka, with Istro, all those components, and it's working, but somehow there are too many moving parts. Yeah. So we feel like maybe there's a different way to doing so. So some of us came to the idea that is, why not we just build a new database with time as the first citizen in the database. So for example, every single table, we call it a stream, have a column called, say we call it underscore TP time. So this is more like event time for that event, right? So if there's any real event time from the event, we just put that in the column. If there's no, we're just using the system clock or the ingestion time. So by doing so, we can have our database storage is optimized for the time. So next time when you query, we can know which folder, which file we can just retrieve to fit that potential time. Also, we can do other stuff like detecting late event. We have some time window, or we can do some time traveling. So as the name, our common name implies, it is put a time into database. So it is Timeplus database or Timeplus IoT or fintech solutions. But again, this is really a not easy thing to do. So we almost around for 2 years, and we leverage some of the open source component, but we build our own streaming query engine with a lot of enhancement on the join. We have our own kind of like streaming storage similar to Kafka, but not that generic. But it's good enough for us to using that to get the real-time data put into this storage without having everything in the memory, but also can serve for all the complex joins. And we can offload certain data back to the historical store, or even some arbitrary storage for cheaper storage. So anyway, long story short, it is a interesting new domain for us, considering we spend so many time. Like for me, I spent 7.5 years in Splunk. So I'm not saying I get kind of board for log analysis, but this new streaming database or real-time processing in general is really interesting, and we are very passionate. We can contribute to some of the new ideas to this domain. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, when we tried Flink, I mean, we realized we need to put Kafka, Flink, where to put that storage in ClickHouse or Cassandra. As you said, there are lots of moving parts to manage, and if one of them fails, we don't know what to do because we are not very familiar with them. So that's the problem you are solving, right?
Yes, yeah. So it can be really good for like earlier team or startup company or build a POC, even for a mature team. I think there's a need for us to get end-to-end kind of a way to debug, to reduce the cost of storage or computing. So again, there's a lot of idea whether we should choose a component and put them together with a lot of moving parts, or should we choose something with a certain combination of certain capability and reduce the compressibility. But again, it's always a very interesting balance. And as a person in this technical domain, we might have a kind of a preference for certain things. So that's not really good or bad. I guess it's really try to find what's the best way considering your current team size, team skill, your schedule, things like that. Yeah. Okay, cool. So again, I'm very glad to talk to you over the platform Riverside and Mastafa, and I'm sure we can talk more. And I'm looking forward to maybe see you in one way or the other somewhere in the world.
Yeah. Sure, me too.
Okay, cool. Thank you, and thank everyone to listen to this podcast or watch this podcast, and stay tuned for the next episode.